Welcome to Monday, the 7th of November. And we're going to be doing a live stream here for just a little bit. I have a couple things planned, but we can go in a lot of different directions. The one sad thing is that right before I went live, I was just making sure all my settings were working. And the way that I get sound from Logic onto the live stream seems to be temporarily broken. It's either a problem with the audio driver I use or OBS. My streaming software just came out with a new version. Instead of scrapping the stream, I decided just to do it with it anyway. So I won't be able to play anything from inside Logic as far as I can tell. Of course, I'm going to push play. If you could hear that music very loudly, then it's working. And if you couldn't, then it's not. I don't think it's working. Hello, Karamater and Jerome. How are you both doing? So really, this all started because I'm working on a video. I don't know if it'll make it out or not, but I'm finding a lot of interesting things. What I'm doing is testing Logic 10.7.5 on Ventura with Logic 10.7.4 not Ventura. And I've got a couple different machines that have previous versions. And it's all very similar. All of my songs are working. The engine is essentially the same when I do phase inversion and just test out if it cancels perfectly. It's canceling perfectly. All my mixes are the same. And so I think everything sound-wise is unchanged. But I did notice, because I was doing lots of exports, when I click Command B to do a bounce, on this new version, it like pops up so fast. On the 10.7.4 on the previous operating system, when I click Command B, it takes at least 2.5 seconds or longer for the bounce window to pop up. The bounce itself is about the same for all purposes. It's the timing of it's very similar. I'm doing it with just 10 cores on my Mac Ultra and 10 cores on the Mac Studio Pro, the other version, and they're very similar for all accounts and purposes when I do the same number of cores. But it's just like that little bit, hitting Command B and having that window fly up is how you expect it to work on a really souped up computer that's very powerful. And yet in previous versions, we weren't getting that. We weren't getting all of the efficiency. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today a little bit, is just some of the things that we get with these smaller upgrades in terms of efficiency that they're not even talking about in the release notes as much. Sure, they do say, we're enhancing performance or whatever, but it's all pretty small. And then in another live stream later this week, I will be making sure my Logic audio is working and we can listen to some stuff, because I do think it's worth talking about the new sample packs that they have put in here. They continue to put in new things, and I think it's interesting. I don't always understand why they're doing things a certain way. For instance, just as an example, this instrument right here, this is the West Coast Modular. This is part of the new banks, one of the new banks, the Modular Rhythms that just came out. And you can see it has 8 different audio effects on here. And sure, it says 8, but I turned up the wet on this one a little bit. It was down to 0. Even though it was turned on, it was not even being used at all. And I think that you'll see here that there's just a teeny bit of roll off in the top and the bottom outside of the widest part of the range of hearing. The delay here, output mix, they're both set to 0 and 0. The pedals, these ones were both turned off. compression was set so low that it wasn't even working. So of all of these things, of all 8 of these effects that they put on this drum machine designer, none of them were actually working or turned on. And so it begs the question of what is happening? Why did they do all of that? 3 of them were turned off. The other, 5 were inactive on some way or another. I get it that they want you to be able to experiment and do things, but it's funny that they put all those things. So of course, let's turn on the smart controls and you'll see that we have some of these things going through those, and so we could turn them up and mess with this. And perhaps that's the way that they want to do it, but I just I don't get it in many ways, the thought process behind putting all of those effects on there, except perhaps to make it look like they're doing something, I guess. So Gunther's saying they give you a good selection of effects that make sense to use, but they're not actually showing say somebody who's brand new to Logic, they're not actually showing them how to use any of those things. In fact, I would say that this is more confusing in some ways than anything for somebody who has no idea what they're doing with Logic. Putting a reverb second to last before an EQ, kind of. A compressor that's not actually doing anything. I mean, all of that stuff, it's just interesting choices. So a newbie, someone who's never used any of those, might actually benefit more from seeing them in action. Like, what are they actually doing? And then they can mess with it instead of having them all turned off. But somebody who's more intermediate or advanced is going to have their own selection of what they want to put on there anyway. So that was just my point more than anything, is that I just thought I think it's interesting when they put all those on there. I don't want to mess up that patch too much because I actually like this beginning of a song that I've got going on here with it, which I'll play in a different live stream once I get the sound going again. But, it is what it is. I think it's just fascinating when they do this stuff. So let's go to an empty one here for a second. Modular rhythms, electronic drum kit. I haven't actually dug in deeper yet, but it looks like they just have all of the exact same list of effects, and just most of them doing nothing. Cool. Okay, so they're consistently doing that at least. The other one was, which one was the other one? All of a sudden maybe it was Flex and Flow. No, Beat Tape. That's what it was. Electronic drum kit, chopped up. I'm just loading these different ones and seeing if anything different pops up. And doesn't. It's all the same. So cool. That's just their methodology with some of these new banks. Let's pull up one that's not perhaps brand new and see if there's any differences. Maybe something else is going on here. Let's do another blank one real quick. Flex and Flow, electronic drum kit. Nope. It looks like it's all of these. Okay. Because you'd want the same 8 effects on every single drum kit you ever used, I suppose, right? That's a little bit of sarcasm, but I just can't imagine who they have right now programming these that's like, this is my... I mean, that's what this is. It's just somebody's list of things, Okay, cool. Let's try a couple of these producer packs and see if any of them have different things. I mean, I can't imagine that the producer packs are going to all have the exact same thing as well. Unless it's not about the thing, it's about the samples that are actually loaded. I mean, it's kind of a bummer in some ways that an artist who they approach and they say, we want to do your files as a kit on here. And they don't actually use any of the logic effects or anything. It's just like one shots that they've made someplace else and brought them in. That's what it looks like. Anyway, I digress to the whole thing. But I was just thinking, I wonder if any of these are using anything else. And they're not. They're all just really generic channel strip with all of that. Yep, I can see that, Gunther. It's definitely with all of them. And I find that like surprising and super lazy. Super lazy. Let's do this the absolute laziest way possible. That's like not even helpful quality at that point. But it is what it is. And so you're really getting the sounds that are loaded here with none of the original processing. It's all baked right into it instead. But it's still, new content is new content, etc. So that, the main thing then, that we'll kind of go back on topic here, was the old versus the new. And apart from a few things that if you need to use a plugin and it isn't working with Ventura, then you should never upgrade, right? Let's take that as our premise for the whole conversation. If you have a tool that doesn't work on Ventura, then don't upgrade to Ventura. Everybody, let's accept that as common knowledge and a fact. That being said, when you get to the point where you can upgrade, this is, for me, it's in the nuance. It's like in all the subtleties, everything right this moment is snappier again. And I said that first when I got my first M1 computer. Everything felt so snappy. Everything was just quick and responsive. And then we get used to that. And then I think either somewhere along the line, I don't know exactly where, when, we actually got bogged down a little bit again. Or the newest version of both 10.7.5 and Ventura once again feel like so snappy, except in a few cases that I've noticed some weird things happening. And so, one of them is when I do screen capture for making videos, that software needs to be updated one more time for Ventura. It's not updated yet, but it's working. It's just not working optimized. But Logic, even though it's in Rosetta mode still, and Rosetta for a few reasons. One of them is Reason. I use the Reason rack. That isn't universal yet. And some of the other tools I use aren't universal yet. But so I'm still using Rosetta. Even with that, this thing is cooking like never before. I mean, I can like flip back and forth between windows while playing, which you won't be able to hear, so I'm going to mute it anyway. But it's like I can just like flip around between things, and it's incredibly useful. Everything is just so responsive, and it's again, I think I went back to 10.7.4 on my other Mac Studio, and it just was a really good reminder because everything was slower and not as responsive. For me, that's a big deal in some ways. I don't know if it's a big deal for everybody. I think everybody has their own big deals. But when I'm working and things take like an extra second to load, that is just like such a intuitive. It's such a buzzkill in a way. It like definitely messes with me, thinking, wow, I have a Mac Studio Ultra, and it could have more RAM. I mean, how much more RAM could I really have on something? You know what I mean? I have 64 gigs of RAM. I mean, how much more do you need for an audio program? So it's like, yeah, I have this beast of a computer and a workstation I really like, and yet everything still seems to like be stuck in like mud or quicksand every once in a while. That part is frustrating. But other than that, things operationally, it is still working in both versions. And I think that that's something that's really interesting to dive into a little bit more. Of the new stuff, so of the stuff announced last week, I've had more time to use some of it. The freeform recording works about the same as the capture recording functionality in the previous version. They both work good, but not great. They both work most of the time, but not all of the time. And so we struggle with that. It's not perfect in any stretch of the imagination. They say they're using machine learning to really enhance the analysis. And I haven't, I've still seen it screw up in predictable places. So it's not perfect, but it is really interesting. I do like, for the first time, that I can easily add a new tempo when I have other tracks already there. Now, we could do this before. So what I would do is just go right to the end of the project, right? And I would play something on a track that had something to play. All right, so I'm just out there in no man's land. I would do that with the adapt tempo turned on. And after I played it, I'd turn on capture recording. So I'd just be like capture recording. And then whatever I played would have the new tempo, right? And then other stuff. So I put that right back into keep tempo at that point. And then anything I pulled out to this would be in that new tempo. So it's the same principle. In some ways, I wish when I was doing the new freeform recording in line with something else, like up here, that it would play the backing tracks. I know that there's conceptually a weird thing about listening to something with a tempo while playing something with the new tempo, but I think most people who can play any sort of MIDI instrument, if they're playing along with somebody, can like disassociate the tempo if they want to do like a slowdown at the end of a phrase. We can disassociate that a little bit and do the slowdown and then have the MIDI and the project actually do that. But you can't do that with Logic. Everything has to be muted. If you unmute it while you're doing a freeform recording, it doesn't record any of the new tempo information. So, there's that part of it. How many of you, I know we've got about 10 to 15 people watching in a moment here. How many of you have upgraded to the new 10.7.5, but are not on Ventura as of this moment? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see what you say. How many of you have upgraded to 10.7.5 but are not on Ventura? I'll give you a second to respond to that. But I'm curious because I want to know what your experiences are so far. So you have Ventura and 10.7.5, Gunther. How have you noticed? Have you noticed any increased performance and responsiveness as I have, or like what are your experiences? Now there's a couple of you, Elon Slitham, Slum. So Betterman says, I wanted to know if you had to download Ventura on the App Store, if it was just the OS update in general. I can't remember. I think you have to go through, you can do that where it says software update in the system preferences. Oh, Stockholm. Okay, that makes sense. So you can't, you can do it in either place, I believe. And Yolan, how have you noticed any kind of uptick in responsiveness, even though you're not on, even though you're on Monterey still? Did the 10.7.5 give you any boost at all? And Gunther says, witnessing some unwanted logic crashes now. Yeah, that is something that does happen. I'm trying to think real honestly about the last couple weeks. I don't think my logic has crashed once since upgrading. And I've got some theories about this. I really do. I have some strong theories about how their testing process goes. Specifically, it feels like, Gunther, what computer are you on? Let me ask that question next. And then Rakamal says, so many problems with the latest version. Oh, interesting. I haven't had any duplicate issues or restarting issues. Um, my theory, one of my theories is that they're doing a lot of their testing on Mac Studio Ultras because it feels like um, that we have more issues in terms of new systems and new software the further your hardware gets behind. They're not like doing as much of that testing anymore. And so the further your hardware gets behind, the more likely you are to have some of the issues with crashing unexpectedly. And the newer your hardware gets, the more that it's been thoroughly tested, because that's what more of the testers are using and the actual coders are using. And so that's a theory. It's a working theory, but that's why I asked that question, because sometimes, you know, I mean, I've had that issue before where I was on like I have a MacBook Pro that is the last. It's the first year of the computers that you can't get Ventura for. So you can't get Ventura for it, but you can still get up before that. So Logic, the new Logic, still works on it. And I need to do some testing with it because I have a feeling that I'm going to see a lot more crashes and stuff on that particular machine than on my new machine. And so it's just an interesting thing. So Bitterman says the faders won't move on these tracks or even with the audio being shown or MIDI. I even checked to make sure it wasn't muted, but I had to just keep duplicating the track and placing the region again. That's interesting. I wonder if that's an issue with like a previous project version that's just pulled into the new version, or something else is happening. That's the first of all the people who are saying things are going wrong. That's the first I've heard of that specific issue. Yeah, Ventura is risky business, and I said this at the very beginning of the video, which most, probably more of you have come in since then. I never recommend upgrading to the newest version. I do it. I do it because I care about all of you, and so it's like I'm gonna mess around with it and explore. But our main computers in the studios where I teach and work on campus, we're not going to go to Ventura anytime soon. So you have to know priority of what your system is. On this computer, I do all my personal projects, and I have a computer backup ready to throw in. Is there that's a problem? But it's like you don't want to have to run a business on a computer that's unreliable. And so it just happens that my business, when I'm using this computer, is making videos on YouTube and doing streams. And so I get to go up there and make that playground part of what I'm doing. And that's different than what most of you are doing. But it seems to, so far, there have been some surprising things, some surprising glitches. It doesn't look like the audio engine changed that much, and yet my screen capture software I use certainly is not working perfectly right now. When I do just normal videos, there are some clicks and pops that are introduced unreliably, I would say, so not consistent. They come and go, but then they get baked in when you do the final version. So it's interesting. It's not my favorite. In terms of everything else, it's like I've already forgotten that we're doing 32-bit file import. that wasn't one on my wish list. I know it's on a lot of people's wish list, but that wasn't on one of mine. Um, the gain tool is always going to be a part of my workflow now because I was using the previous version with the inspector already, but um, that'll be, I mean, it's like, am I going to do that? Or when I'm working on vocal editing, am I still just going to use the flex pitch tool where you can do gain on a syllable by syllable basis inside that editor? I'm probably still going to do most of it there. Um, so that one, I mean, is super nice to have and I will use it, but it's not going to be like a make it or break it deal for me. Um, the freeform record is one that I want to get really good at because I think that it'll help me in the long run with some of the stuff I'd like to do. And so that one I think is exciting. Um, and I want to get this is, I don't know how many of you are really interested in this, but I want to get really good with the stomp boxes, even though they were already all there. Um, I didn't use them all that much because it's kind of a clunky interface to bring in the pedal board for just like one thing on one place. So who knows? But I am going to use those a lot more now that they're individualized things. And I wish I could play a little bit of sounds right here because I put one of these on my bass. But they are cool, and many of them sound really good, and it's nice to be able to have them as individual effects now. So that's one of the ones that I'm still most excited about. And then just the overall, we're back to like having things be a lot snappier in terms of performance again. Let's see, a couple more things. Bitumen, I entirely agree about the free MIDI, but I had some very weird issues when using it. Yeah, and I think that's not uncommon. It was like that with the capture recording feature before it. It was like that with any of the tap to tempo we've had in Logic. It's just kind of quirky, but I think it's learnable. I think that you can learn what you want to do with it and then get better at it. And so I'm going to be working on that for the next couple of weeks and then hopefully make like a real nice how-to guide video for the channel. But it has to be after some real trial and error because you can just say, oh, this is what the feature does and this is what it does. And then people do it and it doesn't work that way in their situation. And that's just because I'd be spouting just the manual to people instead of actual experience. Rizel says, hello from Indonesia. My Logic Pro 10.7.5 running smooth on Ventura inside my 13th inch mid 2012 MacBook Pro. Well, that's weird. Are you sure it's a 2012 MacBook Pro? Because I think the earliest Ventura is going back is like 2017 MacBook Pros. Anyway, maybe you just have the numbers switched or something, but I don't think Ventura works on the 2012s. Another kind, when I play my project, sometimes there is no sound problem. That's another one I haven't had any issue with. It's worked every time, but I definitely have been going back and forth between the interface and just the headphone jack, depending on what I'm doing, just to keep things simple. But oh, okay, running Ventura using OpenCore, sweet. That would explain it. And Valan says the same thing. I don't mess around with tricks for lots of reasons. But I do appreciate the fact that people figure stuff out, which is cool. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for participating with that. I mean, it's good information, and I love that you're all at different levels experimenting with different things. Bitterman says, I will do some testing today, doing some piano house with MIDI chord trigger transposer. Will be really fun to improvise with the free MIDI. I will say the ability to record MIDI from the MIDI effects is something that I like. You can see my chord track here was created that way. However, um, I was really disappointed about one part of that. And it feels like the word of the day is disappointment sometimes with Logic updates. My disappointment was, yes, it does MIDI notes, as far as I can tell. But if, for instance, you put on a modulator and this LFO information, right, it's MIDI data. It is MIDI data. When you go to record that track in there, this is not written into those MIDI files. And that's a bummer because I was hoping to be able to create some complex things with the LFO and then drag them onto audio files or other places. But it only does MIDI notes and some basic MIDI information, but it doesn't do any of the more complex modulators or other things when it writes that data in there. So bummer, for real. Okay, so since this is kind of a Q&A at the same time, are there any questions that anybody's curious about? Or, I mean, obviously I can't answer if a very specific system question because, your system is going to be different than my system. And, we have some people saying that it's working great on a 2012 MacBook Pro, but not working great on a 2021. I mean, it's like, okay, that's what it's like. Yolande says, have you ever considered moving to Reaper? I do sometimes when Apple is a bit hard-headed in their updates. And has anybody else watched my channel enough to know how to respond to that question? How I might respond to that question? Is anybody on here enough of an regular that you'll know how I might answer that question? I'm curious. Yolande from Stockholm is not. So I would probably, there's a whole list of DAWs that I would switch to. There's Studio One, which I'm actually a fan of. They don't do some of the things that I need them to do though. They're not great with surround sound or any sort of spatial audio. There's Reason, which is probably my first workstation I ever used in a studio back in the early days of like Reason 2. There's Nuendo and Cubase, which I think are really smart programs. I like a lot of other programs have been copying Nuendo and Reason for years. I mean, Logic has copied them, Pro Tools has copied them, Studio One has copied them. There's Ableton, but I would never use Ableton. Ableton doesn't work like I think, and so I probably wouldn't switch. FL Studio, I have a copy of FL Studio that I have active on my computer. For some things, I still like that. I'd rather do FL Studio than Ableton. There's GarageBand, but that's the same thing as Logic for the most part. If I had went through every single one of those workstations, say that I decided to leave Logic tomorrow, the very, very last one I would ever consider is Reaper. Because in spite of all of its like frequent updates and community that it has, in spite of all of the tools that it gets added on a regular basis, the thing's got like zero heart. I've had more people who say that there's like this wonderful community around Reaper, and then all the Reaper community does is go and take total dumps on every other piece of software and every other person who doesn't use Reaper. So I'd say Reaper can go live in that pile of turd themselves. That's how I feel about it, just so you know. Good comments coming in though. And who knows, Raccoon? I don't know. Let's see. I agree with Rizel though. Search column for plugin instruments should show up. I wish it would. I wish it would, because it'd be useful to be able to do searches and stuff. A lot of other good comments. But that's how I feel. So I would probably legitimately go to Cubase or Nuendo or Studio One if I wasn't on Logic. I really do like the idea behind Ableton. I think the team who makes Ableton is one of the nicest groups of people I've ever heard things about. I mean, they care about music production, and they're not selling out, and they're doing it for the people who make music. So when you press stop, does it always go back to the start? No. And Pete, if you want, under your navigate menu, stop button options, you can choose what happens when you push play and when you push stop. So if you push stop, you can say stop and go to the left locator, which would be somewhere on your ruler, wherever you set it. You can push stop and go to the last locate position. That's where you last set it up. Or you can just say have it stop. And I always just have mine set to stop. So that way it stops and doesn't go anywhere else. You can also have it jump between different things. Same with the play button. You can choose the hierarchy of where the play button starts in any of those. So you can choose, you can actually have it go to the marquee selection first, or the cycle, or from a selected region, or from last locate position. So you can choose where those are. You can also change where the locators are, so you can actually turn on auto set locators. I pretty much always just like to go to different places, or I'm in the habit right now of using the shift key and clicking in the gray space to get it approximately where I want it. That's my favorite, because that's like a very Pro Tools way of working, and that's where I first located. So it's like for a long time you couldn't just do it. If I click without the shift key, it just doesn't do anything if I hold the shift key. So I just grab the shift key and then locate it wherever I want. Gunther says, I watched so many videos about the music production on Ableton, I feel I already know it. Even if I've never used it, I will stay with Logic always. That's, probably how I am. I don't know. I love Logic. Obviously, I have a YouTube channel all about it, and I explore it in different ways. I'm looking to kind of adapt what I'm doing on here because, I'm trying to keep it interesting for myself and interesting for people who watch videos, but it's like I really want to start making more tutorials about, actually making music and taking viewers' music. So like any of you, it's like you upload one of your tracks and I pull it open on a stream and we go through and actually talk about mixing it. Because what I'm interested in are people's music. And then if I can teach them the techniques using their own project, they're going to remember how to do it. It's going to be way more impactful. And so getting more effective ways of teaching people how to use Logic, I think the next step is you're going to be using their stuff. So Raccoon says the most important thing is that I'm in a phase to ignore the temptation of the dark side of software, if you understand. And Reaper's is very affordable. I agree. I think Reaper is super affordable. I think Logic is super affordable too if you have a computer that runs it. And Bitterman says, agree with you, thanks. Thankful for the channel. Oh, you're the best. There's not too many channels that are focused on Logic. This is very appreciated. And Raccoon, I hear that that's like the number one thing I hear from Reaper users, that it's customizable. I don't care. I don't care about, that's like, so what? Cool. It's customizable. Stop customizing and start making. My favorite people on the internet, the ones that I idolize the most in terms of Logic users, are like on Logic, whatever version, not the newest one. They're like 2 versions of the operating system behind, and they're like, I wouldn't dare move right now if you paid me $1,000. They're like, I'm in too deep with too many projects. I'm like, that's right, just use it. Don't customize it. Don't like make it look different. Don't even worry about how it looks. If you're a video editor, have you ever used Premiere Pro from Adobe? One of these standard, even DaVinci Resolve. I mean, those are like pretty plain looking software programs, right? They don't have like a lot of pizzazz to them. And you know what? The video editors, if you gave them effects that had like fancy knobs, like let's go to my electric piano for a second, right? That has this little thing on here where it's like knobs that look like an actual thing. And if you move it around, there's different things. And it's like all of this like visual prettiness. A video editor is going to look at that and be like, I don't trust it. Why does it have to look good? Like, I just want functionality. I want it to work. I want it to work right. And I think too often we get people who are like, it needs to look amazing in an audio world. And I'm like, really? Does it really need to look good? Of course, that whole argument is an argument for Reaper because I think it's one of the ugliest workstations, even if you customize it. And Logic is like the other way. Too much lately, they've been trying to make it look a certain way. And I do like, for instance, the Drum Machine Designer, which has like minimal icons, more functionality. This is exactly what I think is useful. This kind of thing, instead of, for instance, one of the dumbest plugins that we have, the Drum Kit Designer, right? It's like, okay, cool, I guess I can see this, but do we need all of this like hyper photorealistic drum rug thing? No. Okay, let's see. Cool. So you're talking about more of the shortcuts. Again, customizable. It's like, I think that's less of a concern. All of these pieces of software can do essentially the same things, except when they can't. And so I think that you pick the one that you think it best matches what you want, and then you use it and use it and use it. And then you get really good at it. So, yeah. Everything's bloated, except perhaps Reaper. Um, but certainly OS 10 is full of like excess stuff that we don't need. To the point where you need to buy an even better computer just to get the same performance you used to get before. Anyway, I think we're going to pull the plug on this stream. We've been going for about 43 minutes. Getting a new pair of glasses today. I got to go pick them up. Got to go drop off my ballot so I can vote. Need to drink some water. That's my list. Hope you're all having a great day. And we're going to do another one of these soon. Once I get my audio from Logic back to OBS fixed. Something in Ventura probably broke it, but we'll get that fixed today. See you later, everybody.